I wanted to catch up with you about the various goings on, because the lake is obviously something that's much loved. Lots of visitors come to St Albans for the lake, and the lake seems to have been permanently in the papers since last summer. So I know that we would not choose to build a lake as it is today again, because it's a concrete base.
That's right.
Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, I want to use this opportunity to rest one horrible rumour that's going around saying, please don't fill in and destroy the lake. That's never been discussed, and that's certainly never been something I would countenance. I've lived in this district for well over 30 years. I've loved the lake since I was a child, and I want continued generations to continue enjoying it. The problem we've got with the lake is that it's basically extremely shallow all the way through, and it's a concrete line base. So during hot weather, it heats up, which isn't good for various organisms which can contribute to the avian botulism we've had. And also, the other big problem is that effectively it's a man-made silt trap. So you wouldn't design, if you asked most people who run parks and design parks these days, they wouldn't choose to design an ornamental lake of that kind. So we are where we are, we've got to work with that, and we've got to consider a sustainable solution to make the lake better and to preserve wildlife and the balance of ecology within the lake.
Now, you mentioned that we have had botulism in the lake, and I know that has been treated with something called Symbio, and I've had residents tell me that we're still finding dead birds in the lake. So say more about what caused the botulism, what we can do to prevent it, and if we're going to see this again.
The likelihood is that we can't completely guarantee that botulism won't appear. Botulism was, avian botulism was a result of obviously the high silt, trapping bacteria in the silt, and that being encouraged to expand, to multiply in the very, very hot weather. So that heat wave we had in June incubates that. You're never going to completely eradicate it in a body of water that doesn't necessarily have a strong flow in it. You're never going to eradicate it completely in water that's not intended for human consumption as well. Botulism could well be appearing in the River Ver, because we've had reports of dead birds, very sad reports about birds appearing in the River Ver, which isn't something the District Council manages, that's the Environment Agency. So one of the first things we want to do actually is we want to take samples of the soil up on the sports pitches which are treated with various pesticides and treatments. We want to take samples from the actual River Ver itself and compare them, because it may well be that there is a bigger problem that we need to actually get onto the Environment Agency and say, look guys, you need to help us out here. The other thing with that is that you need to oxygenate the water more. We've got issues with obviously the way the lake was designed. It would sluice through, flush through if you like, with water from the River Ver.
Yes.
But that was obviously a very long time ago in the 1930s. We've got more water being extracted. We hope that Veolia, the water company, are going to be extracting something like 30 million cubic litres less every year. But that'll be as and when they choose to do it. They say next year, but we'll believe that when we see it. That will help, but ideally what we need is more oxygenating plants in the water. So what we're looking at is officers, myself, have been looking at schemes elsewhere. We've been talking to consultants who specialise in this kind of problem, which is far from uncommon in many lakes. We have this problem in Stanborough Lakes and Welling. We have this problem in the Royal Parks, particularly in Hyde Park. So what we're looking at is creating a water course, possibly using gabion baskets to narrow the course as it goes from the boating lake at the top of the lake in the north, and that will hopefully increase that flushing effect, but also taking silt, and rather than paying for its removal, which would cost a lot, for instance it was 20,000 a decade ago to remove it from the boating lake, and it's back. So people saying, oh, the District Council should spend money on removing silt from the lake, that sounds like it's a silver bullet, but it isn't. It's extremely expensive and it's not sustainable. You end up with the same problem 10 years later. So take the silt and move it to behind gabion baskets, and you plant reed beds in that silt. So you've got oxygenating aquatic wildlife that's actually going to increase oxygenation and actually be a sensible habitat for birds as well. The other thing is we've got the possibility of another island to increase that. That's just a possibility, that's just a thought. Certainly the large middle island, as you can see, is almost sinking. So what we're looking at is taking some silt and shoring that up, putting gabion baskets there to make it safer, and then putting more, again, aquatic oxygenating plants in there. Another idea we've had is possibly trying to discourage the Canada geese from spending so much time there. Canada geese produce by far the largest amount of guano, which, put bluntly, adds to the silt levels, because we've got a lake full of bird guano. And obviously that's being contributed to all year round, when usually they would migrate during colder weather. So that's one of the reasons why residents will have seen these lovely signs made by school children,
Yes.
so they understand why it's not a good idea to feed the ducks and the geese, because it disturbs, it plays havoc with their migratory patterns. So that they're in the middle of winter, adding to that guano and so
Yep.
you wouldn't expect them to be. So it's not about being harsh towards them, it's about actually trying to respect the natural cycle of things. But the Canada geese, we want to try and encourage them to remove, if you like, their line of sight from the upper part of the park when it goes towards the Roman wall.
Yes.
So that remove their line of sight to that clear ground there by having maybe a reed bed there, and that, because they can't see line of sight to any of their natural predators, they'd be less encouraged to spend time on the lake, sort of subliminally getting them to move on and not hang around too much, because they're the ones that eat the most and produce the most, shall we say.
Okay, so you've answered sort of lots of the questions that I had in my head. A couple of other things I've heard people say recently is, well, I want my council tax to pay for dredging of the lake. So you said £20,000 for the boating lake beyond the bridge.
Yeah.
So if the people of St Albans were saying, actually, we want that dredging and we're prepared to pay for it through our special expenses, what do you say to that?
I'd say first of all you need to consider what you then don't want your money spent on. That's always an act. I think if you could ask any councillor yourself, any councillor from any party, it's a tough decision when you're looking at the budget process. What I would say is, surely it's better to spend your money on a one-off sustainable solution which is friendly to the wildlife on the lake, will not spoil the lake, because if you have a huge dredging operation you need big dredging equipment and plant equipment. You'd have to possibly shut off the lake. You need to pay for the disposal of the silt, and you can't just chuck it, into a pit somewhere, as people may have done in, years gone by. You actually need to be responsible about that. You need to schedule the removal of that with the Environment Agency. It's not that simple. The second point is, okay, so people say we want to spend our money on it. I've said it needs to be a sustainable solution. If you did all that, so if you dredged it all, and let's say there were no problems, I mean, in the papers we've had, the concerns about what if we found asbestos? Maybe we won't. What if it cracked the lake? Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would all be hunky-dory.
Sure.
If it was, you remove all that stuff, and it's going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of thousands at least that we don't have.
Yep.
You're going to then have to divert that money from the park, whether you're doing it via special expenses or not, and then you're going to have to go back and do exactly the same thing in 10 years. That strikes me as an irresponsible thing to do with people's money, but worse than that, it's environmental vandalism.
No, fair point. Okay, so thinking about timelines then, I obviously sit on the Local Services Scrutiny Committee and heard a couple of weeks ago the report from the officers, and you were there as well. What are the timelines for potentially putting these gabion baskets in, collecting the silt, putting them in there, planting the reed beds to disrupt the behaviour of the Canadian geese?
First of all, I'd just like to make the point that this has been something, and you've referenced the report, this has been something that officers and myself have been working on behind the scenes tirelessly since we've had the first reports of ducks being found dead. That was in July, and we've worked on it ever since then. The first thing is to make sure that it's safe. I would like to say, lots of people read the papers and we hear terms which are frankly, Jessica, libelous. Toxic lake. Well, it isn't a toxic lake. What is toxic, in my opinion, is people who want to drop their rubbish everywhere, and when you see litter gathering in there, that looks disgusting. But the lake isn't, in a chemical sense, toxic. And we regularly, all of those birds, they're picked up, they go to labs, they're tested for whatever problems they may have, and at the forefront of our minds is this an area that's hazardous to human health? No, it's not. Okay. Some people say, oh, what if my child ingested the water? Well, you're a parent.
Yeah, I wouldn't have my kids in there, and I wouldn't have them drinking it, yes.
Precisely. So there is that. So in terms of timescales, we've been working on a lot of those things first. The next thing we've done is we've gone on and looked at all these schemes elsewhere. We now need to consider, first of all, what councillors would be, speaking to people like yourself, what they think would be most sensible. For instance, we've got a radical solution of a third island. I can imagine a lot of people wouldn't be happy with that. Personally, I'm not sure I would be, because it would change a line of sight that's been there for many years.
Yes.
So we'd need to look at different schemes, look at different costings, and then when we have some options, my preferred way to do it would be actually to go out to public consultation. So it's not just the sort of he who shouts loudest, it's not the sort of the political action group.
Yes.
It can actually be ordinary residents of St Albans, ordinary park users will get a chance to actually have a say. And just to give you a statistic here, I think it's important to do that. I think it's important to do this in a measured way, do things, you know, in a methodical way, because this is a park that I have loved for all of my life. I know you've loved it since you've been a resident of the city, and it also draws residents, not just residents, but visitors to the park from way outside. During the summer months, the park actually achieves visitor numbers in excess of about 5,000 every weekend, which is something to be really proud of. And I think that speaks volumes about how other people see our park. It's something that's great, but there's always a lot more we can do to preserve it and make it better still.
Absolutely. And on that happy note, my final question then, a particular bugbear of mine, is the landscaping around the lake. So I've been a park runner running around there when it's been flooded. I've been there with a buggy and having difficulties. And I look at some of that landscaping in the pathway and think, can we do something to improve the look of the lake? Not the water, but around. Yes.
I think that's something you wouldn't do in isolation, and we wouldn't do things, if we weren't going to do anything on the lake, it wouldn't be done in isolation. So if you were going to have gabbing and baskets, planting of new reed beds and things like that, again, you'd have those different options. I would want to see that in conjunction with improving the landscaping.
Okay.
Maybe I'd like to see possibly grass surviving for longer near the lake. How we would do that in a practical way is something we'd need to investigate, because we don't necessarily want to fence off large areas. In the past, some residents and some past councillors have suggested decking, or maybe even sort of pontoon areas, like a viewing area in between reed beds, so people can get closer to the birds in their habitat, and their natural habitat, that is, you know, so they can actually show, so children could go down there and enjoy, and they can see nesting birds, that kind of thing. So we're maybe getting away from the people standing on a concrete parapet, chucking half a loaf of bread in there, and more into the people standing in purpose-built viewing areas with interpretation boards. And it's a nicer, more natural place to be. And children can still enjoy what they always used to enjoy, going to visit the ducks, but maybe see them in a more natural way.
Daniel, thank you ever so much. I really appreciate you talking to me about this, because it's been on the minds of so many residents, and so really pleased to be able to put this out there to the good folk of St Albans.
Nice to get the opportunity, and I think sometimes it's hard. I couldn't respond to every single letter in the Heart's ad, and admittedly I'm sure sometimes we don't want to, but I'm hoping that this will help people, and they know they can get in touch with you or I or other people direct if they want to.
Of course. Thank you, Daniel.